working around the clock to ensure that we are doing everything possible to locate the Titan and the 5 crew members. Search efforts have continued through last night and today. The unified team is working to bring all available assets and expertise to bear as quickly as possible in an effort to solve this very complex problem.
An international search and rescue team is scouring the ocean for any sign of the missing submersible on a voyage to the Titanic.
After 48 hours lost at the bottom of the ocean, will the mini-sub meet the same fate as the wreckage it was looking for?
It's a story that captivated the world when 5 men dive to the wreck of the Titanic and go missing somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. The scale of the search to find them is unprecedented.
Canadian Coast Guard, French authorities, you had American Coast Guard, ships, airplanes. It was frantic.
As the whole world watches, it's a race against time.
They only have so much life support on board, and the oxygen is running out.
Air Force sonar recordings gave the world hope.
And I identified banging noises that appeared to be man-made. That's when the search really changed direction.
The vital audio revealed here for the first time.
We need to have hope, right? We're searching where the noises are, and that's all we can do at this point.
But what actually went wrong? And how many safety warnings were ignored?
We've taken a completely new approach to the sub design, and it's all run with this game controller and these touch screens.
By the self-confessed rule breaker at the helm.
He seemed to think that he knew more than the regulators, so who were they to regulate him?
We all need pioneers. Ego is not a bad thing. It's a great driver, but it also can be a killer.
And what is the truth behind this extraordinary tale?
All sorts of things started to come out, fingers started to be pointed. Everyone has a theory on what happened. Very few people know the answers.
Previously, Titan, an experimental submersible diving to the Titanic, has gone missing, along with the 5 men on board.
The world has been fascinated with the Titanic ever since it sank. But could the 5 passengers of the Titan be paying the ultimate price for that fascination?
1 hour and 45 minutes into their descent, communications with Titan were lost.
The Coast Guard said planes, boats, and indeed another mini-submarine was searching above and below the surface of the North Atlantic.
With only 96 hours of oxygen thought to be on board, it's a race against time to find them.
The U.S. Coast Guard says that oxygen is running out. And the clock is ticking.
As the whole world holds its breath, questions start to be asked about Titan's seaworthiness, and fingers start to be pointed at the man behind it.
Stockton Rush absolutely believed in the integrity of the Titan submersible. There are those that have said it's just a question of if not when something would go wrong.
Stockton Rush is now trapped in his submersible, with oxygen thought to be running out. But there's a flicker of belief. Late on Tuesday, reports of the Canadian Air Force hearing banging deep beneath the waves emerged.
Banging noises were detected by a Canadian aircraft searching for the vessel. A glimmer of hope in a search operation like no other.
We spoke to the ships. They were not doing anything to make those sorts of noises. The problem is trying to figure out whether it was from the people we were looking for or whether it was coming from somewhere else in the ocean.
For experts, hearing the sounds for the first time makes it clear why they became a focus.
Extraordinary. It's clearly an echo, but it's that distinctive boom, 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 boom.
Sounds definitely like it could be man-made. And the fact that you can hear either an echo or a second set of noises, if that wasn't coming from the Titan, what was it coming from? It's very methodic. It sounds like banging on metal or metal breaking apart.
You can't discount it, you can't discredit it. So you have to keep that opportunity of potential hope alive.
When we had identified some possible banging noises that appeared to be man-made, that's when the search really changed directions. Bringing industry and bringing militaries and bringing countries together to try and save these people.
Titan has been in the water for nearly 60 hours. Specialist teams traveling from thousands of miles away are finally arriving in St. John's.
On Tuesday night, it became clear to me that this was going to be a story unlike anything I'd ever covered in my entire life. I was on my way home, and I can feel my car shake. I look up, and there's an American Globemaster aircraft landing at the airport. I immediately drove to the airport to take in the scene and see what was going on. 2 more planes come in.
Journalists are witnessing the arrival of a team of deep-sea experts from New York. They have reached Newfoundland with their own submersible, capable of diving to a depth of 6,000 meters, deeper than Titan is thought to be.
We landed in St. John's and offloaded our equipment on 3 C-17s, and there were a lot of media that were, watching that unfold.
There's a lineup of tractor trailers stretching way beyond the airport. And they start offloading all of this equipment, all this stuff that's going to aid in the search.
The equipment moved from the airport to the ship. Often that's a couple of day effort, and we had to compress a couple of days into a few hours.
We had almost a 380 nautical mile run from St. John's to the site of the missing submarine, to Titanic. And that obviously takes time.
It will take Ed and Jesse the best part of a day to reach the Titan search site.
We just moved as fast as we could, as safely as we could.
And that was when I realized that this was going to be a massive global effort. We were going to see a search unlike we had ever seen before.
Later that day, the US Coast Guard provides an update. Their focus is the unexplained sonar recordings.
Good afternoon. Yesterday, the Canadian P3 detected underwater noises in the search area. As a result, ROV operations were relocated in an attempt to explore the origin of the noises. The data from the P3 aircraft has been shared with our U.S. Navy experts for further analysis, which will be considered in future search plans.
They confirm the banging sounds were heard late on Tuesday the 20th, and again on Wednesday the 21st of June. But the Canadian Air Force say the sounds were heard even earlier, from the very beginning of the search. Information not shared by the US Coast Guard at the time.
In the afternoon on the 19th. That's when we had first got reports of it from the Aurora. The noise was coming from great depths. from the Titanic wreckage area and where the submersible was expected to be.
The Canadians are convinced the site of the banging should be a key focus. And that's where rescue submersibles are heading. But the US Coast Guard is still running a surface search as well, unwilling to rule anything out.
Good afternoon, everyone. The surface search is now approximately 2 times the size of Connecticut. We also have to factor in the ever-changing weather conditions, currents, and sea states that expand the search area every hour.
It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Only by luck are you going to find it.
The haystack is getting bigger because somebody's throwing more hay onto it, but the needle is still the same size.
It is a race against the clock to determine the origin of those sounds and if indeed they're coming from the missing submersible.
If the sounds are man-made, many think they're coming from the crew on board Titan.
Because if they're banging, they must be alive. And if they're alive, there's a chance you can save them.
For the families on the support vessel, the Polar Prince, obviously the news of the banging was, or at least appeared to be, exactly what they were praying for, what they were looking for, what they were hoping for.
If we make it obvious that it's human by making it rhythmic and then waiting a pause and then more rhythmic banging, I just thought that's the typical sort of thing that Hamish would have come up with. I always thought that if they were snagged or running out of oxygen or anything, he'd be one of these people coming up with ideas of what to do. It actually sparks hope. That's signs of life. So the worst hasn't happened. There's a hope here now that we've just got to find them. They're there, trying to make themselves visible through sound. So if we get ROVs or anything down there, you're going to be able to find the craft and hopefully rescue them in time.
Rescue teams now have a focus. They're racing to the source of the banging. But Titan's estimated oxygen is running dangerously low, and the clock is ticking.
We were aware that there were potentially man-made sounds being made by occupants of Titan that were communicating. That's important because we needed to bring our vehicle to a spot on the seafloor where we thought Titan might be.
Maybe there's a chance that they can get to them in time and find them, and it becomes a total race against the clock.
Nearly 400 miles off the coast of Canada, 5 men are thought to be trapped in a deep-sea submersible. Banging sounds, believed to be a distress call, have offered a glimmer of hope. But as the clock strikes midnight on the morning of Thursday, the 22nd of June, the situation is desperate. If Titan is stuck at the bottom of the ocean, oxygen levels are becoming critical.
It's a race against the clock. And for the people who are watching the story, I think the panic is starting to set in.
The suspense, the tension, the kind of edge of the seat feeling of, oh my God, you know, there's impending doom. We can see doom ticking away.
If the submersible is down there, the passengers are entering a 4th day of dangerous conditions and mental torment.
Just a horrific thought of what must be going through their minds down there, thinking that actually this is it.
As soon as panic sets in, you're in an enclosed space. One of the challenges is trying to maintain enough of a state of calm that you're not overusing oxygen. Hyperventilation is not a good thing in that situation.
You can put yourself in that position and the claustrophobia of it all and the fear that you would feel.
The countdown to 0 oxygen remaining is also the driving force for the rescue teams, desperately searching with less and less time remaining.
The sun is coming up. It's a new day of searching. but the sun rising is an indication that time is slipping away.
The ticking clock and the fact that 4 days of oxygen became 3 days, became 2 days, became 12 hours, became 6 hours, it brought an urgency to it which elevated it far beyond a normal news story.
Finally, deep-sea experts from Pelagic Research arrive at the Titan dive site. But oxygen is now down to just 5 hours.
Early in the morning of the 22nd, we got on site, right around daybreak. We certainly knew the window was closing. The entire group of responders that were on scene, Air Force pilots, Canadian Coast Guard folks, industry folks from multiples of ships.
I went out to the stern there and looked around and like, oh yeah, there's something going on here. There's a lot of ships here. You don't usually see that all in one spot.
Upon arrival on site, we had about 45 minutes to an hour to actually get everything set up.
Ed and Jess's submersible, Odysseus, is one of only a few in the world that can reach the depths of the Titanic.
We're expert in this area. This is what we do. I mean, there's no question that everybody was on adrenaline. Everybody was working tirelessly.
I was very much sleep deprived and running on adrenaline. I got up with the guys who were there in order to get the vehicle launched the first time and into the water.
At 4:09 a.m., Odysseus is in the water, but there's still a long way to go.
Of course, we're focused on getting to seafloor. That focus was something that drove us to actually descend faster than we normally descend. We normally descend at 25 meters a minute. We were descending at 35 meters a minute.
We had to get there as fast as possible because there were people in trouble and their oxygen resources are limited, and we knew that.
We were always thinking about them. I mean, inherently in every breath that we took, it was thinking of those breaths.
It will take Odysseus 2 hours to dive to 3,800 meters to the seabed. All the while, Titan's oxygen supply slowly dwindles. An hour into the rescue attempt, Odysseus has reached 2,000 meters. 30 minutes later, it passes 3,000 meters. Finally, at 6:15 a.m., Odysseus is on the seafloor. Titan's oxygen supply is now down to less than 2 hours. And then, disaster.
We actually ran into an issue. We started moving, and some of our thrusters stopped working. And this was the toughest radio call I think I probably ever made, which was, guys, we have a vehicle issue. We're not going to be effective.
After coming so far, Ed and his team seem to have fallen at the final hurdle and begin to resurface. For the crew on board Titan, their would-be rescuers are now not coming. But then, an hour later, hope.
Now, my team started to recover the vehicle, and a couple hundred meters off the seafloor, they turned the system off and turned it back on, and we regained full functionality. We're back in business. We're heading to seafloor.
But the delay has eaten into the remaining time, and almost as soon as Odysseus reaches the sea floor again and restarts its search,
I remember I was on the radio, NPR that morning, just after 8 a.m. Eastern Time.
Ryan, we've been on this story since Monday. How much oxygen could be left there?
It could be gone. It could be gone. Based on the estimates that were given to us on Tuesday by the American Coast Guard, it would have expired about 10 minutes ago. That moment was kind of, you could feel it in your chest.
The moment estimated oxygen ran out could be the tragic end of this story. But for many, until Titan is found, they will hold on to a sense of hope, however small.
Do you want to know? Do you want to know that it's looking really bad? Probably not. Because you're still clinging to that hope. I hope that your loved ones are still alive, can still be brought up safely.
There was still people hoping, putting forward explanations of why they might still be able to survive beyond then. I think people probably didn't want to say the unthinkable, but they would still have been hoping until hope ran out.
You start thinking, well, people like Hamish would immediately be thinking, well, we need to preserve oxygen. So let's breathe slower, let's try and calm everything down.
We started hearing from some experts about how if the water was cold and it would be at that depth, they likely would have gone into hypothermia, which would help them preserve the oxygen, breathe less. Maybe there's still a chance.
You spoke to experts who said, well, maybe this could happen, and maybe the oxygen could last a little bit longer, and maybe that was a sound that we heard, and maybe we can find them, and maybe they will, somehow manage to get back to the surface. Because until all hope is gone, there's always a tiny slice of it.
And so the search continues.
There was potential hope, so we made the decision to keep searching. You can't look at one stop as the end of the game. It's the confidence that you'll find a way. What we were all hoping for was a chance at rescuing the crew.
But what will they find?
Everyone's kind of holding their breath at that point for what's going to come next.
After 4 frantic days of searching, hope is fading fast that the Titan submersible crew will be saved. They went missing 96 hours ago, and it's thought oxygen on board has just run out. But no one is giving up yet.
We decided that, in consultation with OceanGate, we'd keep looking. We're going to find them, and then we're going to need to recover them to the surface.
Ed and his team have sent deep-sea submersible Odysseus nearly 4,000 meters down to locate Titan.
We created a direction to steer in the line that pointed us over to the last known position. We were still moving as fast as we possibly could. Was it motivating? Of course. But we were already motivated, in a sense. And that motivation really never stopped until unfortunately we found debris.
At 8:17 a.m., Odysseus makes a shocking discovery.
We were finding small debris. You're looking around and you're finding things that shouldn't just be sitting on the seafloor. You're like, this is kind of suspect, and this is kind of suspect, and this is kind of suspect.
It seemed apparent and obvious that we were on a piece of debris. It was dramatic, of course, and I think the magnitude of what we were encountering was obviously real and apparent, but then the discussion became, okay, well, what now?
Soon after, the announcement is made that debris has been found, but it's not clear if it's from Titan.
At 11:48 a.m., the US Coast Guard declared that they had found a wreckage field close to the Titanic.
And so at that point, they're not giving any more information than that.
The Coast Guard isn't releasing details, but speculation is rife.
Debris has been found on the seabed close to the wreckage of the Titanic.
The discovery was made by a remotely operated vehicle within the search zone.
For the 5 families, the coming hours could confirm their worst fears.
I think we were all preparing for the inevitable at that point. A debris field didn't point to anything good.
There's no way you're going to have bits of debris unless something terrible has happened, something terrible and violent has happened.
Any form of debris being found, you don't get a small problem with a submersible. It's going to be a big problem.
When the debris was found, that, the answer, you kind of knew that it wasn't good.
There has been an update, some breaking news in the last couple of hours. It's a developing story about that debris found on the ocean floor. I remember being told in my ear that, we've had confirmation that there's going to be a press conference. We're going to remain on air tonight for a press conference from the US Coast Guard.
This morning, an ROV, or remote operated vehicle, from the vessel Horizon Arctic discovered the tailcoat of the Titan submersible approximately 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor.
It's the end that you feared would happen, that you sort of knew would happen, but there is nothing that prepares you for that actual moment when you say, those 5 people on board, they are sadly no longer with us.
This is an incredibly unforgiving environment down there on the seafloor, and the debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion.
The pressure at nearly 4,000 meters proved too much for the Titan to withstand.
If you have a flaw, it'll find it. The pressure will find that flaw. If there is a catastrophic failure, it can cause the entire structure to collapse.
Everyone on board is dead.
I offer my deepest condolences to the family. I can only imagine what this has been like for them, and I hope that this discovery provides some solace during this difficult time.
The first thoughts was just sadness for the loss of lives. In particular for my friend Hamish. Feeling of sorrow for his wife and children.
Dick Barton is on live television when the news breaks.
This is, desperately sad news to all the people around the world, praying that this wasn't going to be the result of this incredibly gripping and absolutely harrowing story.
And we always prepare for this, don't we? She told me he was dead on live national TV. When you're asked, so how does it feel to lose a very good friend on national television, live? That was quite sobering.
You're telling a man that a friend of his is dead. That's not broadcasting, is it? That's probably one of the most kind of intimate conversations you could ever have with a human being. So you're not putting on any kind of performance, you're actually doing it.
Christine Dawood, the wife of Shahzada and mother of Suleiman, gives a harrowing interview about her loss.
I think I lost hope when we passed the 96 hours mark. That's when I lost hope. And that's when I even then sent a message to my family on shore. I said, I'm preparing for the worst. That I miss them. And I really, really miss them. Yeah.
Actually knew Stockton Rush. It wasn't just a bunch of strangers. It was like, holy crap, I shook his hand. It was a gut punch. It was a visceral punch.
The mission has changed from rescue to recovery. Teams remain at the site for another 4 days, working around the clock to bring what's left of Titan to the surface.
We continued our effort to map the debris field. We operated 24 hours a day. We made another 6 dives, which included the recovery of items that were identified.
On the 28th of June, Ed and his team returned to shore aboard the Horizon Arctic.
The boat comes in, offloads the last pieces of Titan that they were able to find. You've got the nose cone, the titanium nose cone that's still perfectly intact, and then strands of the carbon fiber hull that are still held together.
It was also really surprising to see how intact pieces were. You could very clearly see the porthole. The glass was no longer in it. It's unmistakable. It's Titan.
These phantom pieces of Titan that they're going to try and piece back together to figure out what went wrong.
So what caused this tragedy? And when did Titan implode? After the news was confirmed, details of a strange noise the US Navy detected on Sunday the 18th of June are revealed.
It was reported that the Navy had heard a noise which was similar to an implosion or explosion. That information came out many days later.
And we now know, in fact it is certain, that the Americans were able to detect the implosion of Titan as it went down to Titanic. Now, for some reason, they didn't choose to reveal that until it was known that nobody had survived on Titan.
Everybody wanted them to be found and survive. But the reality was something totally different, that an implosion had happened and all the 5 passengers on board had perished.
The US Navy couldn't be completely sure what it had heard, but the suspected sound of an implosion was detected around the time Titan lost communications.
In a strange way, I was actually a little bit relieved. It meant that this will have happened very quickly on the descent. It meant that there wasn't days and days of psychological torment for these people as they slowly asphyxiated or worse.
In a way, it's kind of a relief that you know there wouldn't have been any suffering. It would have been instantaneous for the poor souls in there.
If Titan imploded so soon after starting its dive, what were the banging noises that had offered so much hope?
Titanic is this huge wreck. It's decayed, it's been there 100 years. There's all sorts of metal banging around.
It could have been a ship in the area, it could have been anything.
What you do during a rescue is you bang and you follow a set process so people know that it's a submarine that's in distress or on the bottom. But the reality is that that didn't happen.
As the truth about Titan's fate begins to surface, questions start to be asked about who is to blame. And was it an accident waiting to happen?
Everybody in that vessel got in there of their own volition. In whatever guise and whatever level of understanding, they all knew the risks. But something happened which could have been avoided.
all sorts of things started to come out, fingers started to be pointed.
So the narrative had already changed from one of hope and one of search to one of search for the guilty.
Five men are dead. They perished in a catastrophic implosion on board a deep-sea submersible while descending to the wreck of the Titanic in the North Atlantic Ocean. Now, the world and 4 grieving families want to know why.
Questions started to swirl at that point about the safety of this whole mission.
What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? And what were the warning signs?
There are a variety of questions that OceanGate need to answer, and they need to answer it not just for the families, but they also need to answer it for the rescue services that were involved in it.
The man with the answers is tragically among the dead. Stockton Rush.
Stockton Rush died in this tragedy, and he was the CEO of OceanGate, and therefore holds ultimate accountability for his own decisions and also responsibility for his team's input and team's decisions. His accountability is marked by the fact that he's died by his own craft. The tragedy is that he took a whole load of people with him.
Stockton Rush was born into a wealthy family. The descendant of 2 signatories of the United States Declaration of Independence, he worked as a flight test engineer before founding OceanGate in 2009.
I knew Stockton really well, and a lot of people had serious concerns as it became more obvious of what OceanGate was planning.
He is cool, he is friendly, but you don't know what he is thinking at the moment. He's a really cool businessman.
He seemed, to me, an alright guy, bit of a maverick.
Rush had an obsession with the Titanic and with taking paying tourists to see it.
His family, because great-great-grandma and grandpa from his wife died at the Titanic, I think it was both. It was business and it was passion.
I think it would be an extremely moving and emotional time for somebody who knows everything about the Titanic. When they actually get to the bow, that ends up being the really the heart-wrenching period to realize where they are.
He had a true and honest passion for ocean exploration. He really was trying to explore different ways of making the ways to get underwater more democratic, to bring it to more people. He was very passionate about that.
But persistent rumors of cut corners in the design and build of the Titan sub dogged Rush's reputation and ambitions, and questions in the submersible world started to be asked.
The choice of materials for constructing Titan, I think, were probably at best adventurous and optimistic. We had 2 titanium end caps and a compound fiber tube. To put those 2 together, it'd be hard to bind them, to bond them properly.
I never believed in that technology of wound carbon fiber. I thought it was a horrible idea. I wish I'd spoken up. It just sounded bad.
Pressure vessels for human occupancy is serious business. 1,000,001 ways for something to go wrong.
The appearance is he did it to save money, he did it to save time, and he did it because he thought he could.
We'd also been shown the insides. It turns out that everybody was sitting on the floor, kind of that doesn't seem terribly comfortable for the length of the dive, but okay. It turns out that matting that you were sitting on was flammable. The lighting within it was something that you would get from a DIY store.
And sometimes risks are acceptable. I think where this becomes controversial is when you're taking paying customers.
Some potential customers were so put off by Stockton Rush's approach, they had a change of heart.
I was signed up to go down to the Titanic with OceanGate. And in November 2018, I've had enough of this. And I pulled out. Asked for a refund.
But Stockton Rush seemed proud, even bragging to his other clients, as seen in this revealing YouTube video.
You know, I've broken some rules to make this,
I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did. It's picking the rules that you break that are the ones that will add value to others and add value to society. And that really, to me, is about innovation.
I think there may have been a certain amount of ego involved in this, a certain amount of belief that he was there to change things, and that any criticism that was put to him was an attack on his creativity, his intellect, his integrity, potentially.
But ego is not a bad thing. It's a great driver, but it also can be a killer.
As well as using questionable materials to build Titan, Rush crucially didn't have its design reviewed by industry experts, despite a stark warning.
In 2018, my idea was, what if we draft a letter? That letter was meant to say, look, you're part of the Brotherhood. It looks like you're going rogue. We're worried. And we're all telling you, be careful, because the risks here are very high, and it could be from benign to catastrophic.
Yes, I signed the letter. We were worried about a Hindenburg event.
So Stockton pretty well called me right away and said, hey, Will, what is this? And I said, well, we mean it. We have some serious concerns. So to that, Stockton said, well, I'm way ahead of you guys. This is innovation. We got to break the rules. That's what I'm doing, and you guys are too slow, too late, too far behind, too expensive, it takes too long, we'll never make progress, and I'm here to open the ocean to the entire world. We left the phone call on agreeing to disagree, while he was fairly upset at that point.
When you look back at that letter that they wrote, it's kind of chilling to see the warnings that they put on paper before any of this happened.
My view is that it was hubris and arrogance. So he was a groundbreaker, there's no doubt about that. But he thought that he was the god in this position, that he could create something, be innovative, be clever. That's a great thing to be doing. But you have to listen to the greater community and other experts.
If you do not do it right, people will die. You just don't get chances when you go that deep. The ocean will kill you.
OceanGate has ceased operations. Its website is now merely a black screen. Multiple investigations have begun to determine exactly what happened to Titan, the submersible that met an eerily similar fate to the ship it was looking for.
It has similarities to the fate of the Titanic itself. Unheeded warnings. Edward Smith, the captain of the Titanic, warned about the ice that lay ahead. Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, had been warned 5 years before the tragedy happened.
We all know what happened to the Titanic back in 1912, and I think probably there was that same spirit of exploration and that same spirit of there are no boundaries that we cannot cross to those who were involved in the Titan sub. Sadly, they both ended with the loss of life.
It's almost like a piece of folklore already. Lives were lost. Real people, families, friends, loved ones will be affected for the rest of their lives. It's terrible tragedy. I guess what makes it even more upsetting is that perhaps it could have been avoided.